We finally left the end zone. Just look at this beautiful scenery. It's marvelous, even though it's a bit different from what we had pictured. We were able to secure a few basic resources and are storing them in our bus.
How you doing today? Let's build ourselves a new home. Actually, I like this game already, so...
I'm glad we prepared ourselves well for this kind of scenario, especially since our inventories in the end zone ran low. Don't forget that if you need additional information, you can look at our survival guide at any time.
Open survival guide. To help tasks, freely local settlers are instructed to gather certain resources and remove radiation in certain areas. Tasks like this will only perform the settlers who do not perform the function. After settlers who perform tasks at the same time, this task for removing radiation tasks. To remove radiation will be carried out by any settler who currently has nothing to do, by those settlers who have been assigned profession. Settlers will gather wood, trees, for the active area. Get collected scrap piles after the working area. Scrap from our region, large ruins. Mushrooms, herbs, resources. Radiation problems, pollution, soil, just freely available settlers.
Well done. Everything you need to know should be right here. I think the time has come for us to at last build ourselves a new home here. Before we can construct buildings at all, we have to assign the profession builder to several settlers so that they can take care of construction contracts. In general, it's your responsibility to decide which tasks are important and how our settlers are supposed to be distributed to attend to them.
Kill the deer that are walking right up to the tree.
All right, your builders will be ready as soon as construction contracts have been issued. It's time to start focusing on our key and most basic need, water. The first thing we ought to do is to establish a working water supply. So we'll move on to our first construction contract. Place and build a jetty by a lake in the vicinity of your town center.
Jetty by the town center, huh? spill it, you bums.
Very good. The jetty was completed as planned. Now we have a place where we can collect water. There are other possibilities to gather water too, but the jetty is the simplest and most cost-effective method.
Well, it's raining. They can't make goddamn water tower.
We can obtain and store water from different sources, like a jetty, rain collector, or well in the cistern. The cistern should always be in close proximity to a water source so that our water carriers don't have to walk too far.
Get on the builders. Hurry up, I ain't got all day.
Great. We have now installed a working water supply, and water is now transported from the jetty to our cistern. Consider hiring more water carriers if you don't have enough settlers available. You can never have enough water in storage. Now we should focus on food production. It's important to ensure the supply right from the start. The gatherer's cabin, a hunting lodge, or a fishing hut can directly remedy the situation.
Well, these deer
I suggest starting with a fishing hut, since we're already located near a lake.
Okay, I'll do a fishing hut. Now that we know how to rotate buildings, tutorial. Something you brought up.
Good work. We've now taken care of our basic supply via food and water. Make sure that you have enough food and water on hand at all times, especially if you want to upgrade your settlement. A population that grows too fast can quickly unbalance your food and water supply, bringing major difficulties for you if you don't watch out. Crops are another excellent way of getting food because they constantly grow as long as the soil is moist enough. Each seed has different yields and growing times. This means that it could take some time until your field is ready to be harvested, in contrast to your fishing hut, where production can be right away.
Cultivate field. Cultivate, that. Go farm, farmers, farm. Where are my farmers? Oh, shoot, come on then. Cabbage. Get out of here, deer! Let me eat my cabbage.
Looks good. Remember that we need the widest variety of food sources to stay healthy. You should also plan ahead for drought periods that might come when it's not going to rain. Stock up on food and adapt your production to avoid bottlenecks. I'll show you a few more strategies later on. At the beginning, we don't have much scrap, wood, or other resources. We could build a production building, but to obtain resources as fast as possible, it's best that we start gathering right away. Assign a Gather All Resources task. All the settlers who haven't been assigned any profession by you are going to accept these kinds of tasks. In addition, settlers distribute resources within your settlement.
That's nice. So that takes, like, I'm assuming that's like the workers. Got a pretty badass RV, not gonna lie. Free settler? What do you mean? No. No.
Since we now own plenty of resources,
My bad. We can still build a full production. Not only easier to manage, they also traditionally
Right on. The best thing for us to do now is to build a forester's lodge to automate our supply of wood and make it more effective at the same time. Foresters are not only able to chop down trees, they reforest areas with trees as well.
There's no one building. There we go.
Good job. You might want to change this building's working area later on to tell your workers where they should get their wood from. Ah, and for your information, if you want, you can also tell your Forester's Lodge that they only ought to attend to reforesting an area in order to create a lush, green forest which generations to come can use.
That's pretty cool.
Very good. Now we ought to take care of collecting scrap. Scrap is one of the most valuable resources because the quantities present are limited, and we can recover other resources from scrap. Unlike the task we just had, the scrap yard allows larger quantities of existing scrap to be dismantled than with ruins or wrecks.
Still gotta get that game. It's kind of like this game, but you're like in a frozen world. And you actually have to use the core of the earth to actually become warm, so you have to like build out from where you built this giant tunnel.
Great. You can change the working area for the scrapyard too. We can recycle scrap into 4 additional resources: cloth, metal, plastic, and electronics. We'll do that shortly. For now, we ought to take care of your settlers' needs first. Our people want a place to sleep and live. Cabins fulfill their need for safety and privacy, and increase the confidence of their inhabitants. In other words, building cabins increases their willingness to start families and reproduce, if you know what I mean.
Build a cabin, man. Alright. Build our cabin.
Besides cabins, you can also provide sturdy houses and shelters as housing. Sturdy houses withstand sandstorms better and have an increased storage capacity to boot. Children living in houses gradually fill up the house's stockpiles. Settlers do not reproduce in a shelter because they lack privacy.
Okay.
Let's return from our excursion into housing and refocus on scrap. With the help of a recycler or refinery, scrap can be sorted into 4 different resources. A recycler always takes scrap apart, one resource at a time, while a refinery automatically produces all 4 resources. To start off, you should build a recycler and produce cloth.
Okay.
You can instruct your recycler to produce a different resource at a time. It's important that you focus on the resources you really need, at least in the beginning. Cloth and metal look like good options if you want to equip us with protective clothing and tools. Happy settlers are industrious settlers. That's why we ought to look after our people and protect them against the surroundings and dangers, like radiation. So let's start by transforming our newly recovered cloth into protective clothing. A tailor will be able to help us with that. We categorize environmental radiation into 4 levels: no radiation, low level, medium level, and high level radiation. The radiation changes constantly and is influenced by weather and contaminated rain. Protective clothing helps to protect us against this kind of radiation, but it takes a while before it's produced. And production relies on a steady flow of incoming resources. Try to establish production chains at an early stage and start to stockpile goods so that some are always on hand. The tools we brought along from the Endzone are slowly but surely running out. So now, let's focus on manufacturing new tools. The tools will help us to work effectively. We'll need metal for that, so we'll prepare for production by building another recycler, which we'll commission to recover metal from scrap. After that, we'll need a workshop to enable the manufacturing of brand new tools.
Did we steal all the water out of the lake? Let's not get water for a while. I don't know if that's what happened or what. The lake's dry. Comes back when it rains, I don't know. At least, right?
With our lovely new tools, we are now prepared to work effectively. Should you ever run out of metal, keep in mind that you can also instruct your workshop to manufacture tools from scrap instead of metal. Though they won't be quite as effective, it's still better than being forced to work with bare hands. Down in the end zone, we had sufficient time and resources to educate ourselves properly. But our children don't have this luxury. We ought to build a school and pass on what we've learned. As a result, they will be able to survive and work better and more effectively. Perfect. Besides the fact that educated children work more effectively, we'll also teach them to be more careful with their protective clothing and tools. This, in turn, leads to them staying intact longer, and we conserve valuable resources.
That's gonna go out classified.
Now that our population is starting to grow, we ought to again turn our attention to the topic of food production. We are already accumulating fish and tilling our fields. A gatherer's cabin will now enable us to gather mushrooms and berries from the forest nearby.
Way out in the woods. That's kind of cool. They clear the area too. Nice. If anyone on the chat thinks this game looks cool, it's actually on sale for only $2.99 right now on Steam. It's been on my wish list for probably like a year or something, but it's like, yeah, you guys in that? Yeah, I'll grab it. I think it's like 90% off or something right now. I think it's only like $30. So far, not a bad little filler game. I think later you gotta worry about like raiders and other stuff, and of course, like I think there's like radiation storms and all kinds of different things. I'm assuming this is more of a smaller map for the tutorial.
Very good. As you can see, the gatherer's cabin is an effective possibility to get food quickly. But watch out. After a drought, it's going to take some time before the plants have regrown. As is the case with most buildings, here too, you can relocate the working area at any time. Although we are sufficiently supplied at the moment, our survival depends on diligent planning. If we can lay out a plan for an orchard, then we can start to plant fruit or nut trees that we can harvest after a few seasons.
Right in front of the folks' homes.
The orchard has been laid out, and the trees are already beginning to grow. Similar to crops for farming, trees need some time until they are fully grown. But once they have grown, they can be harvested again and again until they have to be newly planted. Our gatherer's cabin gathers food from the surrounding forests. However, there are any number of other plants there which we can use as well. These plants can be gathered by an herbal hut. The herbs gathered there can be consumed by settlers to replenish their health.
Get on it, scrappers.
Well done. We can equally utilize the gathered herbs to convert them into medicine later on. It might happen that an illness breaks out in our settlement from time to time and spreads among our settlers. That's why we always ought to have enough herbs on hand. Radiation is the main reason why the health status of our settlement can decrease. Although our settlers already use protective clothing to shield themselves against environmental radiation, it might occur that our sources of water become contaminated. We should start to filter our water to prevent this from happening. We will need a great deal of charcoal to accomplish this. The charcoal kiln will burn wood to produce charcoal.
Wanted me to buy another welder.
Great. We can use the charcoal in conjunction with a filtration system to purify our water. Unfortunately, our cistern is not able to do this. Only the water tower has the necessary equipment for this capability. It would be a disgrace if we had to demolish our trusted cistern just to erect a water tower in its place. What we ought to do instead is upgrade the cistern itself. A water tower can store much more water and provides workplaces for a lot more water carriers than our old cistern. Our new water tower is up and ready for action. Good work. Filtering the water is an important next step because clean drinking water is a key mainstay of any stable society. Let's begin with filtering our water. To save on charcoal, we ought to ensure that at least a little bit of water not contaminated by radiation is being stored in our water tower. Water gained from a well is never contaminated by radiation, so it suggests itself for that purpose. Then we can use the remaining charcoal to produce better protective clothing. Good work. We are continuously taking steps towards being better and better equipped to be able to survive in this hostile environment. Filtered water is a precious asset, and later on we can even use it to irrigate our fields. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Not only our water can become a hazard for our settlers due to radiation, our food can too. We ought to erect a decontamination post to prevent settlers from eating meals that are contaminated with radiation. Very good. The decontamination post is going to supply all buildings that stockpile food and are located in its working area in order to purify the food that has been affected by radiation. It's true. We should never forget that even when we optimally prepare and protect ourselves, we're still going to lose friends and members of our family time and again. We're going to mourn them, come what may. But if we're able to bury them in a cemetery, then we'll get over the pain and let them rest in peace. Okay, the cemetery will help us to quickly get a hold on ourselves and focus on the tasks that lie ahead. It's not a pleasant thought, but that's the way things are. At the very least, we're pioneers, aren't we? Maybe we ought to distract ourselves to lighten up the mood. We can erect a number of buildings to increase confidence in our settlement, including, for example, a campfire or a pub. In this situation, however, our best option would probably be to upgrade our town center. Settlers can visit the new town center, and by doing so, increase their confidence for a while. We can erect a number of buildings to increase confidence in our settlement, including, for example, a campfire or a pub. In this situation, very good. The new town center not only gives us more storage space, at the same time, it functions just like a campfire too. Settlers can visit the new town center, and by doing so, increase their confidence for a while. Now that we have made efforts to ensure the spiritual well-being of our settlers, we ought to attend to their physical health as well. Our settlers can get sick from time to time. Settlers who have become infected with a disease can die from it if they're not treated. Settlers will go to a medical facility to have themselves treated and will be admitted there, provided that beds are still available. We ought to ensure our settlers' medical health care. With this step, we have ensured the survival of the settlement for a while. Very good work. Since more and more children are being born these days, we should start to plan for the long term. While cabins are a good way to get settlers to start a family, they only provide limited space. This can quickly lead to people having to live on the street. Allow me to suggest to you that cabins be provided only in a very targeted manner in order to control the population growth of your settlement. Nothing is worse than not having enough resources to provide for everyone. We ought to build a shelter to be able to provide other inhabitants with a roof over their heads too. Very good. Remember that when children grow up, they're going to leave their parents' house and look around for a new place to live. It might happen that they don't find any home at all. We ought to build a shelter to be able to provide all inhabitants with a roof over their heads. I've already pointed out to you that it could become very dangerous if we were to run out of food at some point. Since a lot of people are going to be living in the new shelter, we ought to provide them with access to food in their vicinity. A hunting lodge can look for wildlife in the surrounding area to bring a little meat to the menu. Perfect. The hunting lodge equally provides us directly with food, but it functions somewhat irregularly because it relies on wildlife in the surrounding area. Nevertheless, it can be indispensable during a drought because even the deer and wild boar still roam around the forest. However, wild animals can not only be shot, they can be captured too. When a wild animal has been captured, it can be brought to a pasture and served there as livestock. In order to capture wild animals, you have to instruct your hunter to do this. You also ought to set up a pasture and assign a herder.
Looks like they're just digging it up.
Animals captured by a hunter are brought to a pasture where they are tended to and cared for by herders. Some animals produce resources such as milk or eggs. Other animals can only be slaughtered to eat. You ought to find out for yourself which type of animal brings you which benefit. On each pasture, you can choose which type of animal ought to be kept there. You must provide water for the animals you keep on your pasture. This enables them to survive and reproduce. When enough animals are fully grown, the herder will start to slaughter them. If you don't want animals to be slaughtered, you can also instruct the herder not to do so. Now your herders know how they ought to handle the animals. And now that you've already captured several animals, don't forget to instruct your hunters to hunt animals again in the future so that they can continue to gather and provide food. With our increased production, our stockpile is going to run out soon. The supply routes for our production buildings are getting longer and longer too. To tackle these problems, you ought to build a temporary storeroom and have roads laid out.
Temporary storeroom. Dirt road.
good. Temporary storerooms increase your settlement's general storage capacity. Place them in a targeted manner in order to shorten the routes for goods between your production buildings. Roads are equally a great benefit because settlers moving on roads can go distinctly faster than on a normal supporting surface. To improve the whole thing even further, we can build a market to improve logistics at the settlement. Besides being an enormous stockpile for resources that is even able to store water, the market is responsible for distributing resources within your settlement. What's more, it also increases your settlers' confidence. logisticians are able to amass resources from the whole settlement and bring them to the market. This improves the flow of your products and leads to your settlers having to walk shorter distances to fulfill their individual needs. The combination of these attributes makes the market the ideal building when you want to enlarge or even relocate your settlement. The larger your settlement gets, the farther some settlers have to travel to get to all of the food you produce. To make life a little easier for them, you can build a food station. Logisticians who work at the food station will collect food from your storage buildings and production facilities and bring it to the food station. With the new food station, your settlers are now able to supply themselves with food directly on site. If your settlement is supposed to grow even further, you can think about whether you want to provide additional food stations. Distributing food at your settlement is going to prove to be extremely practical. However, your settlers not only need food to survive, they need water too. To be able to distribute water in a targeted manner, you can build a water point.
So radiation just moved, or what the hell?
Now that your settlers also have a water point available, they can supply themselves with water and food. Similar to how it's done at the food stations, this enables you to precisely control at which places your settlers are able to attend to their needs. Since we have our logistics under control, now we can concern ourselves with the weather and its challenges. We can build a weather station to enable us to make a forecast regarding upcoming weather and learn if potentially contaminated rain might be coming our way. It can also be used to prepare our crops and rainwater collectors we might have against contaminated rain by covering them.
this is it for me on this one. Y'all have a good day. Thanks for watching.